Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock. We'd like to get started. Everyone who's going to be here from the task force is here. Thank you all for showing up tonight. This is part 2 of the RFP proposals for the airport road property, where we're going to be hearing from another of the submitters tonight. I'll go through a brief introduction about the project for those of you who have not seen it yet. We do have the one item on our agenda tonight, which is the presentation and discussion of the proposal from Integrated Manchester Housing Initiative, LLC. And then we'll have a room for public comment before we're adjourning at 7 or before, to keep in mind that the library does close at 7 o'clock. Members here at tonight on the board, myself, I'm Jonathan West. I'm the chair of the Housing Task Force. I'm also a member of the Manchester Select Board. Tim Waker, who will not be here tonight, is the vice chair. He is also chair of the Development Review Board. Joanne O'Connor, sitting to my right here, is the secretary. She is a climate and renewable energy advocate. John Burnham, executive director of the Manchester Business Association. Cindy Luce, Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity of Bennington County. John Watanabe works in property management and is a member of the Design Advisory Board. And Leon Ward is a designer and developer and a member of the Planning Commission. The parcel, oh my goodness, it is downpouring. The parcel that we are going to be discussing tonight is known as the Airport Road parcel. It consists of 60.15 acres, which is mostly wooded. It does include an airstrip that is defunct. No planes have landed there. It is not Albany Airport. We have 6.8 acres of that 60 acres, which is subject to conservation easement. It is zoned MU2, which is known as mixed use 2, which equates to one dwelling per 4,000 square feet and allows for single, double, and multi-family homes, among other things. It does have a 1/4 acre per lot minimum lot size. This is a sketch here of the property. So you can see the red outline as it cuts through the airstrip, adjoins to US Highway 7, and has access through Airport Road, which then goes on to Richville Road. There's been some discussion, and I will, my goodness. July tropical storm for Vermont. Okay, so we're talking about paying less than 30% of your income. How that's determined is through homeownership. That includes your mortgage, your taxes, and your insurance. For rental, that's rent and utilities. And what's really important to understand is that housing that is affordable is different for each household. The number of people you have, the salary you make, the salary you earn as a household will determine what's affordable to you. But when we take a look at some of the other terms that people are used to, which is such as affordable housing with a capital A, those are the affordability that includes subsidies. Workforce housing is the section above that. You don't quite qualify for those subsidies, but there is a, quote, missing middle of housing that is not available, that it's out of reach for a lot of people in our community. It's determined by the area median income. So that determines the affordability based on the locality This is based on the counties outside of Addison and Chittenden County. So based on the number of people in your household, there's a full scale that goes up to 8 people. The area median income for Bennington County for one person living in the household is $78,200. And that goes up progressively for 2, 3, and 4 people. So just as an example, I went through and took that 4-person household, 2 parents, 2 kids, and said, what is the range that total household income would be? You can see at the average median income price, that's income amount, that's $111,700. Down to 80% of that number is $89,000. The range at the top is $134,000. So within that bracket, that's what we deem workforce housing. People who are not able to identify themselves with a lower income bracket, which qualifies them for subsidies. That doesn't mean that people in the affordable housing section with a capital A aren't part of the workforce. But there's, you've heard prior members of the Housing Task Force talk about the missing middle, homes that are just out of reach from folks earning a less than modest income for a family of 4. So I broke this down a little bit more, and I didn't get as much time as I needed to actually add a little bit more descriptors on here. But I took those same numbers, your 80%, your 100%, and 120% range. And then I said, okay, 30% of that number is what we deem as affordable, 30% or less. That means that in these price ranges, or these income ranges, you're looking at $26,000 on the low end to $40,000 that you can use every year towards your income, towards your housing. When you break that out monthly, we're looking at a range of $2,200 to $3,300. Now, what does that mean for what you could afford? Using a 5% down payment, a 6.5% interest rate, and including your taxes and insurance, that means that you can afford between a $330,000 home and a $475,000 home. Rentals means you can afford at 30%, $2,200 a month for your rent, up to $3,300 a month. Now, just today, I just went on Zillow and pulled up the listings in Manchester. There was one listing which was a 1-bedroom, which obviously would not work for a family of 4. There was also a for sale by owner, which I removed because it was a 2-bedroom house. And this is what we're left with. 3 homes, a 3-2 listed for $379,000, a 3-3 for $445,000, and another 3-3 for $475,000, all of which, those last 2, would have an HOA on top of that. Those are the only 3 homes. So where we get this information is from the Vermont Housing Finance Authority. They have a fantastic website, which I will show in just a moment. But we went through a housing needs assessment over the past couple years that determined that, first of all, in Manchester, if you look at the bar chart, bar graph over on the left-hand side, this determines, this shows you what % of people in Manchester are experiencing a burden, income burden, because of their what they're paying in rental or home housing costs. We have 30% of our population who are paying more than 30%, and 19% who are paying more than 50%. Okay, so that's 49% of the people living in Manchester are paying more than 30%. When this was all extrapolated and we look at what needs are going to, what we envision the needs are, the county, the state have worked together to build a target. This is a target. This is not a mandate. This is a target based on our death rate, our birth rate, a rate of homelessness, several different factors. And ultimately, what it comes down to is that the town of Manchester, to keep on track with the needs of our community, needs to build 200 units of housing over the next 6 years. At a rate of 13.2 permits per year, currently in the town of Manchester as of last year, we're not going to hit that target. So as I mentioned, the housingdata.org is a fantastic website that is available to everyone, where you can dig into the data, slice it, dice it, put it in bar graphs, whatever you want to do, and I highly recommend taking a look at it. For those of you who are paying attention, we were going to have two groups speaking tonight. We are adding a third night because we love seeing everyone. But we wanted to be fair to all three groups to give them an equal amount of time. So we are holding a third meeting next week, same time, but at the town hall. So next Thursday, the project driven by Brent Herman will be presented at town hall. Yes. Sure. I understand. I understand, and we try to be as mindful as possible, but with the amount of people on the board that represent other boards, we are limited to the days that are available. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing here. So next up, I understand Mr. Cooperman, who's one of the presenters from our group tonight, will be doing the presentation. So let me just stop this here. All right, and you should be all set.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me okay? Alrighty. And do we have Zoom connection is still live as well? Great. So good evening. Thank you for having us. My name is Adam Cooperman, and along with Steve Rosenberg and Integrated Manchester Housing Initiative. To begin our presentation, I will turn it over to Steve Rosenberg, who's joining us via Zoom, for a quick couple of words, and then I will be back.
Great. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you all hear me? Yes, they said yes. Okay. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Jonathan. My name's Steve Rosenberg. I'm a member of IMHI, and I'm also a property owner of commercial and residential property here in Manchester and a part-time resident of South Londonderry. I thought it would be helpful, and Jonathan, I think you're hitting right on it, to talk about our perspective on the development of these 60 acres. Our perspective is that these 60 acres in the long term have to belong to the town of Manchester. And accordingly, what we have proposed, rather than acquiring the 60 acres, we are proposing a 99-year land lease in which the long-term interest of the town, and particularly the aquifer, is protected over the long term. Therefore, our proposal does not envision the town transferring the property to us, but rather through the development of a lease arrangement, giving the town the opportunity to define its priorities for the 60 acres, and ultimately turning the property back over to the town at the termination of the lease. Obviously, the issue of infrastructure, road access, water, and sewer is essential to developing these 60 acres. It's no secret that Paul and I own the corner of Richfield Road and Airport Road, and there are some questions as to whether the town's right-of-way on that parcel has been done through a taking. Therefore, our proposal starts off with negotiation on access, water, and sewer, and developing a deal with the town in which we would either transfer that parcel over to the town or negotiating a clean right-of-way. I think that as the town recognizes, the best use and highest use of those 60 acres are housing for a broader income stream And because we share in that recognition and belief, we are proposing to develop a relationship with the town in which the town defines the criteria of what's built on those 60 acres through the lease. Along with the Levis family, we would be neighbors in any development of these 60 acres. And like many others in town, we are extraordinarily respectful of the creative work that Dr. Albert Levis has done during his lifetime and his decision to acquire the airport tower in order to create a long-term legacy of his work. Accordingly, as neighbors, we have developed a memorandum of understanding with Dr. Levis and his family in order to assure that any development of the airport site will not impede the legacy of his work that is being created and will share in our emphasis of conservation and protection of the aquifer. That MOU is attached for your reading. With that, Adam, I would turn it back to you to talk about the specifics of our proposal, and then we'll go to Q&A.
Great, thank you, Steve. For the last 10 years, I've been developing and building affordable housing, both in Northern California and throughout New England. Along with Paul and Steve's local, regional, and our collective national experience, we believe that our proposed development of Airport Road is innovative and will deliver the town a lasting asset while providing much needed housing to the current and future residents of Manchester. Our proposed land lease structure will create a partnership between the town of Manchester and our team. Acting as the leaseor, the town will maintain ownership of the site, have the ability to guide the design, density, and resident population, all while receiving financial benefits that can be realized tomorrow and into the future. I will spend the next few minutes summarizing the response that we provided to the town's request for a proposal that was submitted in April. Integrated Manchester Housing Initiative aims to create diverse, inclusive communities by mixing housing types, income levels, demographics, by promoting social cohesion and equal opportunities for all residents, regardless of socioeconomic status. The proposal we submitted offered to do this by creating up to 300 units of housing, half coming in the form of multifamily rental apartments targeted at multiple income levels, but focused on workforce housing and age-in-place units. We commit to reserving at least 20% of the total rental units to workforce housing. The other 50% of development will focus on rental and home ownership opportunities through multiple phased developments of townhouse-style villas, ranging in the sizes of approximately 1,200 to 2,000 square feet. These homes will offer private parking, yards, and an overall single-family living style. Lastly, as noted in the proposal, a portion of the 60-acre site will be reserved for community housing. I'm happy to share that our team is working directly with the local chapter of Habitat for Humanity to finalize an MOU and partnership, where if selected to develop the site, we will provide Habitat with land to build at least 10 homes. Our team will take a responsible approach to balance the density of this development. The architecture will build off of historical community aesthetic and modern design. We will achieve this while prioritizing sustainable, efficient, and high-quality construction. The final site and development plan is subject to negotiations and approvals with the town of Manchester. The construction would be completed in phases, and with the workforce housing portion constructed in the first phase. These details will be finalized in partnership with the town through site approvals and the land lease negotiation. As mentioned, the financing plan for this project is based on a long-term land lease with the town and supplemental private commercial financing. The property will be divided into multiple plats for the phased development of various types of housing. Monetary contributions will be made to the town in the form of a $1 million payment to be contributed for the installation of sewer and water infrastructure. This contribution will be made upon planning, zoning, and state agency approvals. In addition, the town will receive 5% of the sales price of any plat that is sold into the future. This financing scheme is beneficial for 3 reasons. It does not constrain or dictate the resident population. It allows the town to maintain control via the lease agreement, and it provides the town with short, medium, and long-range financial benefits. This is a true partnership to provide housing that is needed and a project that is supported. Our financing plan does not include the use of low-income housing tax credits, as the source of funding would not allow for the three benefits I just described. In closing, Integrated Manchester Housing Initiative is looking to form a partnership with the town of Manchester and the Housing Task Force. The Housing Task Force can become part of this process through the negotiations of the lease terms and that would be ratified by the Select Board. We offer solutions as community members and housing professionals, and we want you to be part of this process. Thank you for your time, and we would be happy to answer any questions that you all have.
Okay, so we'll start with the task force.
Yes.
You had to use the mic. And Leon, if you could also state your name so the people at home could hear.
Hello, okay, people at home, I'm Leon Ward. I'm the planning commission, on the planning commission here in Manchester. Question for Adam. You said that 20% of the housing you build will be workforce housing, and you'll be building that in the first phase, correct?
20% of the rental, the multifamily rental portion. So we have identified half of the development of up to 300 units, half of that to be multifamily residential, and half of that to be the townhouse style villas. So of the multifamily portion, there's a dedicated minimum of 20%.
So it's 300 divided in half, 150 divided in half for the townhouses. So 75 houses, and 20% of that is workforce housing rentals of that 75 houses?
No, so of the up to 300, 150 rentals, 150 ownership rental. However, those are sold and taken into use. So of the 150 rentals, which we have assumed but would be negotiated through the lease agreement with the town, 20% of the 150 rentals would be set aside for workforce.
Okay. Yeah, 30 plus, and then there's the 10 houses that Habitat will be building. That adds 40 of an affordable house range. Are there any houses for sale that will be affordable housing?
That is, I'd say, too early in our process to commit to, but it's something we are open to reviewing during the lease terms with the town.
Mr. Rosenberg, if I had you on mute because there was some feedback, so if you want to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Jonathan. I just want to make it clear that these are all subject to the town. If the town decides that you want more single-family homes or duplexes that are affordable housing, that's something that the town puts into the lease agreement. That we have just come out with what we think are ideas, but again, you are the lessor, we are the lessee. And as the lessor, these are things that fall within your control.
John Watanabe with Design and Development Review Board. The timeline for the phases, do you have a sense of what the full timeline is for build out? What do you envision that to be?
I think that would really be a derivative of what is, again, determined to be part of that lease agreement, and where we land with what the town is wanting to see and what we're able to commit to. A typical construction cycle of a multifamily apartment building would be in the range of 14 to 18 months of construction. On the front end of that, there's obviously, understanding and negotiations with the town on site access, utilities, planning, approvals. And so that could, we can't assume really what that will take. There's a lot of administrative and public process that we would have to enter.
And regarding the 20% reservation for workforce housing, that is negotiable?
Yes, as Mr. Rosenberg said, that is absolutely part of the partnership that we look to enter into with the town.
Very good, thank you.
John Burnham, Manchester Business Association. As a non-developer, I'm a little confused on the statements between lease and then you were talking about selling plats as time. So could you just explain how that works? If it's a full lease, then how do you sell plats in the process?
Well, got it. What we're selling is the right under the 99-year lease. So whatever terms the town has developed as part of the master lease agreement pass over to those subplots. So to be clear, what we're talking about doing is a lot of subplots that may bring in different developers, that may bring in different types, including the habitat model. And so what we're trying to do is understand that we're part of this community. Paul and I are very much part of this community. Adam has a lot of experience. And we don't think that we should come down on high and say, this is what should be built. We think that has to be a collaborative process with you all.
Hi, this is Cindy from Habitat. Excited about the partnership, obviously. So I'm just want to just go back to your question, John, a little bit about what this is, if I may.
Please.
It's all about shared equity. Okay, so and that's what we operate on at Habitat, and that's actually, like Leon, we've talked about this in our meetings, and I think Woodstock does this, right, with that land trust. So it's all about land trust, sharing the land. That's actually allows it to keep it affordable. So you're not having to really purchase the land, you're purchasing the building and the right to live there, right? Am I kind of
Yeah.
explaining it correct?
Yes.
I'm Joanne O'Connor. I was wondering if you are, and maybe this is again something the town would be in their side to decide, but renewable energies, is that something that you would be doing? You would be taking propane and gas out of the picture?
Again, I'd say that it's hard to commit to anything like that today. My personal passion and the work that I do on a daily basis is about efficient, sustainable construction, long-term efficiency, and sustainable use. So those are principles that I work under and would make a commitment to integrate on any job that I was.
And would you consider modular homes?
It is a very interesting field that I would say that yes, it'd be considered. I think that there's peaks and valleys in the world of modular right now. So finding the right partner is certainly you'd have to do the research and find the right one.
Thank you.
Jonathan West. Obviously, based on you talking about separating plats out for different developer or development opportunities, would the development potentially that you would be more focused on, like the initial workforce housing piece, if that would under your group and not a separate developer,
That's
would
correct.
that be relying on outside workforce, meaning we'd be bringing folks in to do this, or would be looking at local vendors? How would you see that landscape?
I think to the extent possible, we want it to be as local as possible. Jonathan, it might be worth talking a little bit about why we don't want to use low-income housing credits. If you have a low-income housing credit, then anyone in the state of Vermont gets to apply for that unit through a lottery. You lose control over providing housing for the local folks that you're trying to provide housing for. So in terms of the construction, yes, we would envision that we, in fact, would be the very first developers of the workforce housing. And to the extent possible and practical, we would use local contractors and local subs.
Okay. To the audience, if you would like to ask a question of the group, please come up to the mic, announce yourself with your name. And if you have a question online, please just raise your hand.
Joan Fitzpatrick, and I'm a real estate broker in town. When you talked about homes for sale, right? I'm just wondering if it's a land lease, like he was mentioning, how would one secure mortgages or lending if they're on a land lease? I haven't seen that done before, particularly if you're using an FHA loan or a PA loan, something like that. How would somebody get a mortgage?
It's typical to be able to get a mortgage on leased land on a 99-year lease. That's done all the time.
Oh, it is done all. You also mentioned community housing.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
What is the percentage of community housing, and how would you describe community housing?
The
What is the
community
percent?
housing. Oh, go ahead.
I couldn't hear it, Adam. You take it.
The question was about community housing and how we would define it. Our partnership that we are working through with Habitat for Humanity is what we would consider to be the portion of community housing. So that agreement is still in draft form and negotiation, but at this level, we are happy to commit to at least 10 homes that would go to Habitat organization, which is very community driven and obviously building homes for people in the community that need those homes.
And I have a question for you. You said you have experience doing projects like this, California or wherever. Have you ever done something like this? Is there a template that you might be following or kind of mimicking, or is this a whole new concept?
It's definitely not a whole new concept. It is a multi-phased development of housing, which is something that our entire team has great experience with.
So, all right, the other thing is with regard to when the town owns the land and they're the lessor, how do you deal with taxes and real estate taxes? Is it like a homesteaded situation, or how is that handled? And how is
So
that passed on?
Yeah, so if you're a homeowner that you basically own your home, you're subject to the land to a 99-year lease, you're paying property tax just like anyone else. That the town town list will basically define what your tax burden is. It's really no different. There's really little difference between ownership and a 99-year lease, other than the 99-year lease in a planned development allows the town to set the criteria for development. You're not dependent on a developer to do whatever they want.
So would the homes in this community have an HOA fee? Would there be
Yes,
something
they
like that? Are there
Yes, they would.
amenities, pools,
Yeah.
parks, and things like that?
Yes, absolutely. Again, to answer your question, this is what's called a planned development. This is fairly typical, and you generally have an HOA, which governs the development of the entire 60 acres, again, subject to the criteria the town would define.
And that is basically based on the amount of square footage per unit, so it's like a POA, and then each individual multi-housing villas and that, they're all their own separate HOA?
No, so what you would likely have in a typical planned development, to go back to answer your question, if we've seen this sort of thing before, you will have a global HOA for everything that is being built on the 60 acres. And let's assume for the moment that you have a separate neighborhood of 60 houses that are all single family. They could have their own sub HOA that govern the construction and aesthetics of those 60 acres. That's typically how it's done.
Okay, and when you talked about sustainable construction, does any of that have net zero considered? Any type of net zero where you go back to the grid, or?
I mean, it could be considered, yes.
It would be considered. And, okay. So I think it's a great idea. We obviously need it. And I think the closer we can get to Jonathan's definition of affordable housing in this community, that would be wonderful. Because if you only have 3 listings, it's a huge need. So I think this would be a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Eric Salat. I live in the village. I'm just concerned about the traffic patterns. Is a traffic study going to be done?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Will a traffic pattern study be done as part of this project? We have country roads here. We've got 150 units. They all try to drive up Union Street at the same time. We've got a problem.
those types of items are typically addressed through the plan approval process with the town.
And I would also say this has come up with multiple the proposals is that keep in mind that this property also is abutting Route 7, which does not currently have access. It is a managed road. However, that doesn't stop it from potentially being addressed that way. I'm not saying that's on the map, but it is adjacent to it, so there wouldn't be any right-of-way issues. I did have one question, and I asked this of the previous applicant as well. What do you see as the biggest challenges that you face right now with your proposal in the environment that we're in Manchester and so on?
I think timeline, the faster that you're able to get this thing into motion, the more momentum you can build and the bigger benefit you will have to not let the items stall out. I think one of the biggest benefits of our proposal is that the financing mechanisms we intend to utilize are not federally driven and are not subject to the roller coaster ride of typical affordable housing right now. And I think that gives us an advantage to be able to move quickly to get through that challenge of timing that I just described, and to really start with action as quickly as possible.
Jonathan, I'd like to articulate what I think is actually a bigger challenge. When you have a developer who comes in from the outside and they're making all the decisions, the community doesn't need to define exactly what they want and what they envision. So I perceive the biggest challenge would be you all as the Housing Task Force and the Select Board being very clear about what your criteria are for what you're looking for, and enabling us as the developer to be able to define that we can meet those goals. I think the biggest challenge that I see is the internal clarity that our proposal requires you to develop as our community partner. Again, we're not talking about a developer coming in and making these decisions for the town. We're talking about the town making these decisions, which takes time. And I think that's the biggest challenge, to be blunt.
John Burnham again, Manchester Business Association. The last presentation we reviewed, they did mention that they would consider, if it was a smaller scale project, meaning not all 60 acres, they would certainly consider doing something in that realm as well. Would the same hold true for you folks if, I know it changes the RFP from 60 acres, but let's say just 20 acres to start with and see where we go from there?
I think this is a town question, not an us question, to be honest.
John again, from Design Development Review Board. Do you envision the town being involved in the declaration, in the creation of the declaration and the governing documents for these HOAs?
I think the town would set the criteria. I don't think the town would be writing the CCRs. I don't think that's the town's function. I think the town would tell us what the criteria are. Typically in a plan development, you guys define the criteria and we go ahead and implement it.
Very good.
Go ahead, Bill.
Bill Drunzik, I'm just looking for a little clarification here. And when it was, if I heard correctly, and please correct me if I misstate, but the 5% contribution from property sales, how do you proceed that? Are you taking 150 lots and selling the land, or you put a price on it into each house, a given price? And what about the rental side of it? And then the second question, if I understood you correctly, was that you're contributing $1 million up front towards the infrastructure costs. Who pays for the rest of the infrastructure costs, and do you have any estimate of what that is for the roads, power, water and sewer, and also up to the property plus on the property itself?
Can I break that into two different answers, Bill? I think on the second answer is no, we don't have a clear sense of what those infrastructure costs will be because we haven't gotten a clear sense of what the town envisions in terms of that. In terms of the 5%, I think there are two ways to think of that. One way is that you basically subdivide, sell a plat to a developer, and the town gets 5% of the sale of that plat. Another way to do it is you cut the deal with the developer that as the homes are sold, the town gets 5% of each sales price. Again, these are criteria that we envision developing in partnership with the town. We're not coming in with a particular script. There's experience in developing plan developments, and they sort of follow a Chinese menu of A or B, but we're not deciding A or B. Those decisions are being made collaboratively with the town.
So it sounds like you would be open to having multiple builders on the lot. So
If that was
multiple-
something that the town decided that it was important for the town to have, the answer would be yes. If, on the other hand, in the lease agreement, you gave us freedom as to whether that would occur or not, that would frankly be shaped by market forces. Again, I think part of, again, what's unique about our proposal is we're not looking to bring in state or federal funding that definitionally doesn't allow the town of Manchester to create a priority for Manchester residents and people that work in the town, because the feds set criteria that this is based on lotteries that anybody can apply for. We're local. We're trying to meet the needs of the town as you've described them. And I think that all of those are open possibilities depending upon what you guys want and how it shapes out.
Oh, we got one more.
My name's Tim Lawler. This is kind of not directly applied to you or your group, but it sounds like from the two proposals we've heard so far, there's a whole lot of questions. There are many questions that aren't answered. And I'm wondering if we're putting the cart before the horse and if the town should engage in some kind of community involvement to identify all these parameters that DEW had suggested were necessary and this group tonight suggested were necessary. And if that's not going to precede the decision, is there going to be a time where we don't address the proposers, but is there a time where the community could address this board? Thank you.
I will answer that. We have meetings every month at minimum. And those meetings are open to the public, and we are looking for folks to show up and participate. In fact, our attendance has been slim to none over the past year. This is the largest audience that, well, last week was larger, but these two events are the largest we've actually had at one of our meetings. I know that through the years, there have been multiple studies and conversations with the community through multiple iterations of the Housing Task Force, which have asked for those exact things. What are we looking for? What do we want to do? Where's the gap in our housing needs? We're trying to now sew that all together and move forward. I think we also, I think it's very important to have community input, and I think as this group has described, is that's part of their plan, is to make sure that the town has some part of a driving force in that. But what I would say is that we also have been talking about the needs of Manchester housing for 40 plus years. We had the same discussions 40 years ago when the plan was built in 1988 for the housing roadmap that we're still not executing, right? So yes, we could certainly say that the cart was before the horse. So this was an open-ended request for proposal to see where the interest would lie. We got 3 applicants with interest. And I think, as I mentioned in last week's meeting, this is not just a discussion about that one plot of property. This is the other developers or landowners in the community around that area that, we were talking about the costs of the infrastructure, right? Who's going to pay for that? Well, there may be a collective answer to that. It's maybe not on one person or one group. It may not just be on the town. It can be a collection of people or organizations. We have to come at this at the most open-minded community effort. We have to be able to have conversations, discussions openly and honestly. But at the same time, we also have to do something, right? Because my dad, who was on that committee 40 years ago, who helped write that plan, handed me the copy the day that I became a select board member and said, here, you might be able to use this. And I was looking through it and I said, oh my God, we're still there from 1988. The only thing that was different was it was in typewriter and not done on a computer. Okay, so I say that we can talk about this over and over again. We're having these same discussions across the state, across the country. We know we've had folks from the state level do assessments about housing needs. We are doing our best to come up with, really dissecting and coming up with very clear directives of this is the type of housing that we need. But if we continue to discuss and discuss and discuss, we won't have a town left and people to work in our stores. And I think when we started this as schools, I was actually going to put up another slide to just explain that, the starting salary at MEMS is $46,000 a year. That's $22 an hour. They would already fall into the low income under 80% AMI. That's why our teachers are driving 45 minutes to an hour to get here to teach. That's why we have streams of traffic coming in on Bonnet Street, on 7A, coming from Cambridge and Granville and all the towns outside of Manchester, because they can afford something there. So if we wanted help with traffic, there's a great opportunity. Keep people in our community. And so there's a lot of different angles to this. Ultimately, this is a discussion. We have some great groups that have come together and put some thought into this. And our goal, by the way, of the Housing Task Force is to make a recommendation to the Select Board. It is not to be the final decider, but is based on our collective input. We have members of the Select Board, the Planning Commission, the Design Review Board, the Design Advisory Board. We have members from nonprofits and the local community, all part of this board. So our goal is to review and make a recommendation to the Select Board, which ultimately holds the keys to the next step. Carol, did you want to?
Thank you. My name is Carol DuPont. My question is, has anyone really studied how many people want to move here? First of all, when I go around and I say, either in a doctor's office or someplace else, do you have to commute? And they say yes. And I say, would you move here if you had a place to live? And I've only done it twice. But out of the 2 times, both the people have said no. I live in New York State. It's cheaper than living in Vermont, and I'd rather drive it. So I want you to really look at that. But the other thing you better be looking at, it depends on what happens with the schools here. If the schools start closing Shaftesbury and different schools, you're going to lose population. You're not going to gain it. No one's going to move here and put their kindergarten or first or second grade child on a bus for 45 minutes. They're not going to do it. So you better take all these things into consideration and look at them hard.
Because schools are going to be, I think, the most important thing in Vermont this year. Thank you.
Carol, we may not agree on a lot of things, but I definitely agree with you. Schools are very important. Okay. On that note, I want to thank everyone for coming today. Thank you to Mr. Cooperman, Mr. Rosenberg, Mr. Caraccio for the proposal and for being present tonight. And just a reminder, we will be having one more meeting this coming Thursday at Town Hall at 6 o'clock, where the final proposal will be discussed and likely a sub-discussion about next steps for the Housing Task Force on the 3 proposals. All right, thank you very much. Have a great night.